Welcome to Psychology at Work. I'm Dr. Paul Brewerton, otherwise known as the Strengths Guy. As a doctor of psychology and the founder and chair of Strengthscope, I'm here to share my insights with you. Tune in for a regular dose of positive, strengths-based content. My podcasts are packed full of tips and tools designed to enhance your world of work. Ready to dive into the good stuff in this episode? Then let's go. You know, they say that feedback is a gift, but that's still not how most people see it. Giving feedback is still regarded as one of the most challenging aspects of organisational life. I've podcasted and blogged on this topic quite a bit in the past, so do go back and search the back catalogue using feedback as the search term if you're interested to hear or read more. Giving feedback is seen as hard for managers, but also for teammates and colleagues at work. Here's a statistic from our most recent database extracts at Strengthscope. With a sample size of over 1,500 from our Strengthscope team database for 2023-24, we found that of 15 areas relating to positive team behaviour that team members are asked to rate, like having a clear purpose, getting together to share successes, relying on each other to get the job done, and so on. The second to lowest rated area is team members providing constructive feedback to each other. And yet, in 2021, based on a global dataset of over 1 million employee responses, WorkLeap reported that 96% of employees said that receiving feedback regularly is a good thing. 83% of employees really appreciate receiving feedback, regardless of whether it's positive or negative. And 62% of employees wish they received more feedback from their colleagues. So, with all that in mind, and to help people get more courageous and step into the discomfort they feel about giving feedback, a US author, Kim Scott, who had managed large tech teams across Silicon Valley, created a model that I want to share with you today. It's called the Radical Candor model. The subtitle of her book is Be a Kick-Ass Boss Without Losing Your Humanity. But actually it applies not just to bosses, but to all employees and is super useful in teams. So the model itself is easier to draw than to describe. There's a handy diagram over on the blog version of this episode on the Strengthscope website in the resources section, but let me try and paint a visual picture. So it's a 2x2 matrix with 4 quadrants and 2 axes. The first axis is care personally, going from bottom to top. The more caring, the higher up the scale. And the second is challenge directly, going from left to right with more challenge on the right. What Scott says is that too many people, managers and colleagues alike, care so much, so they're super high on the care personally axis, that they don't want to risk disrupting what they see as a positive relationship with their colleague. And so they fail to challenge directly. That is, to give constructive feedback, so they don't. And the feedback never gets said. So it never gets heard. So it never leads to change. Actually, it leads, by definition, to ignorance, because the person who should hear the feedback doesn't even know there was feedback to hear. And that leads to a state, as Scott describes it, of ruinous empathy. And I love that label. Empathy that ruins you, however well-intended. This is empathy that doesn't help. It hinders. Nobody learns. Nothing improves. It's ruinous. And we all do it. On the other end of the challenge directly axis, change does happen. And it happens because the people who provide this kind of feedback are willing to disrupt the status quo. They are willing to put the feedback recipient's development ahead of their own fears and anxieties because they're prepared to be radically candid. They still care. They stay human. They're not cruel, but they're willing to give feedback and to challenge someone to think or do differently. And this can lead to profound growth and change. I've shared the stats on how much people need and want feedback. At the end of it all, people crave clarity. So they need to hear the good and the bad because both can help growth. For completeness, I'll briefly talk about the other 2 quadrants, the lower quadrants of Kim Scott's model, but only briefly. There's a link to her 6-minute introduction to the Radical Candor model on the blog version of this episode, so please check that out if you want to hear it. It is a great resource, by the way. I've used it many times with many teams. It always goes down well. So on the lower 2 quadrants of the model, we have a situation where the feedback giver does not care personally. In the first of these, the feedback giver doesn't care personally, but does challenge directly. And Scott calls this obnoxious aggression. I love these labels. When you forget the compassion and caring, but you challenge directly, you may see a little change, but this is more likely to be change based around compliance, and any change is likely to come after a big wodge of defensiveness because people like to feel valued and respected, and that needs to be evident throughout any attempt to give feedback. The final and darkest quadrant of the model is manipulative insincerity. No caring and no challenging. You've disconnected emotionally, there's an aloofness that's going to be evident in the relationship and people will feel it. So it definitely doesn't lead to change, and worse, over time, it leads to mistrust. So beware manipulative insincerity. Again, we are all prone to it. I really like Kim Scott's emotive labels because typically people's first reaction when they come across this model is to be a little bit shocked by the strength of language. But after a moment of it sitting with them, people understand the labels quickly and also see their own behavior in those labels. And I think that's important. And it's important to communicate with emotional impact on this because feedback is an emotive topic. And that's the reason there's not enough of it. So I think that shock factor is actually welcome. In summary then, Radical Candor facilitates communication that's kind, clear, concise, and sincere. It's good for teams and individuals. It establishes a healthy relationship between a leader and their direct reports and within teams. So what gets in the way of Radical Candor? Well, my experiences of Kim Scott's model are several. I've used it with a number of international teams of professionals from various industries, and it always lands well. Most often I use it to tee up some sort of group feedback session like speed feedback, where you need to give each colleague in your team one thing you appreciate about them and one thing that would improve the quality of your working relationship or something along those lines. You have 1 minute per person each way, and then you move on. It can start off awkwardly, but with the preamble from Kim Scott, these sessions generally go well. However, in some teams, particularly new teams, or those who haven't been working together long, or in teams who've just been through a lot of change, or maybe those who are experiencing some sort of dysfunction where trust is low, anxiety around hurting others' feelings, or your message landing badly, or making things worse than they really are already, can get in the way of delivering that radically candid message that's so needed, wanted, and important for learning. We're really aware of this at Strengthscope, and we're also aware that adopting a positive psychology-based approach that focuses on strengths and what we love, what we're energized by, can lead to a greater deal of openness and to a greater acceptance of constructive feedback on what might need to change or be done differently. So what we've done is develop a strengths-based feedback framework that over time can establish that culture of growth mindset and psychological safety that Kim Scott references in Radical Candor, and which can lead to people being much more open and honest in giving and receiving feedback. So this is used as a key tool for managers and teams who want to give kind, clear, concise, sincere feedback. And you may already know it, or you may not. It's Strengthscope 360, a 360-degree feedback tool based on positive psychology that supports leaders who want to bring radical candor to their teams. And it works for any and all teams, no matter how sensitive or delicate their context or relationships. And that is in part because it's completed anonymously and online, and in part because you're asked to provide feedback using the language of strengths, which is, at its heart, a really caring way of giving feedback. But the tool also provides the balance of challenging directly by asking feedback providers to say how they feel someone's strengths could be used better or differently. The feedback we get on the tool is that people tend to be much more open to change based on their Strengthscope 360 report than they are based on traditional 360-degree reports. We're seeing a big uptick in Strengthscope 360 being requested right across our client base this year. So if you want to have a chat with the team about how to use it, to get in touch with us, do that please, because we love talking about our products and how they can help. In conclusion, I just want to give another shout out to the power of feedback delivered with clarity, kindness, and the intent of helping to improve things. That kind of feedback is radically candid, and it's the most likely to lead to positive, long-lasting change for the recipient. Till next time, stay strong.